You've been searching for years, maybe decades, reading books, attending retreats, practicing mindfulness, trying countless techniques, following different gurus, and yet, that feeling, that thing you're looking for, still feels just beyond your grasp. Every time you think you're getting closer, it slips away like sand. You feel like you're making progress, but somehow, the destination never quite arrives. What if I told you that this endless search isn't actually bringing you any closer to awakening? And what if the very seat of seeking is the thing that's keeping you trapped? What if your journey of self-discovery has become your false self's most clever disguise? Eckhart Tolle reveals something that most soul searchers don't want to hear. The search for awakening is often the biggest obstacle to awakening itself. The seeker and the sought are locked in an eternal dance where one can never catch the other, because ultimately they're the same thing wearing different masks. Today, I'm going to expose why this spiritual seeking can be the greatest. Tricks of the false self, not to discourage you but to liberate you from a trap that keeps millions of sincere soul searchers running in circles. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why. Stopping the search might be the most profound spiritual act you ever perform. Let's begin with a truth that seems paradoxical at first, but once you see it, everything changes. The false self doesn't die when you become spiritual. It transforms, it puts on new clothes. It learns the language of awakening and uses it to strengthen itself. This is what Tolle calls the spiritual ego, and it's far more dangerous than the ordinary ego because it's hidden behind a mask of humility and growth. Think about it. The moment you identify as a soul searcher, you've created a new identity. I am someone who is seeking enlightenment. I am on a journey of self-discovery. I am more conscious than most people. These statements feel noble. They feel like progress. But look closely. They all begin with I am. The false self has simply found a new territory to occupy. Tolle explains this with striking clarity. He says that the mind structure operates in the same way for a so-called spiritual person as for a so-called materialistic person, the soul searcher who think, one day, I'll be good enough at my mindfulness practice, or one day, I'll attain enlightenment, is no different from the person who thinks, one day I'll have $50 million in the bank and then I'll be somebody. Both are placing their fulfillment in the future. Both are saying that this moment is not enough. Both are running toward a destination that recedes as they approach. The content of the goal is different, but the mechanism is identical. This is the first trick of the false self in spiritual seeking. It takes your genuine longing for truth and turns it into another future project, another goal to achieve, another mountain to climb. And just like every other false self goal, it can never be reached, because reaching it would mean the death of the seeker. And the seeker doesn't want to die. Here's where it gets even more subtle. The false self learns spiritual concepts and uses them to feel superior. It becomes what some teachers call the spiritual ego trap. You start perceiving yourself as spiritually superior to others. You look at people who are not on the path and feel a quiet sense of being more advanced, more evolved, more conscious. But as Tolle points out, if your awakening takes you further away from people and makes you feel even more alienated, you've only awakened. The spiritual ego, true awakening, brings you closer to humanity. It dissolves the sense of separation. It does not create new categories of us versus them, awakened versus asleep. The irony is painful when you see it clearly. The very thing you're using to transcend ego is being used by the ego to strengthen itself. Your mindfulness practice becomes a badge of identity. Your spiritual knowledge becomes intellectual territory to defend. Your awakening experiences become stories you tell to establish your spiritual credentials. This pattern is more common than most seekers want to admit. The spiritual community SAG is full of people who have traded one identity for another. They used to identify with their career or their possessions. Now they identify with their practices, their teacher, their level of consciousness. The surface changed, the underlying mechanism remained the same. Let me share something. Tolle rarely states so directly, but it's embedded throughout his teaching. The seeker can never find what it's looking for because the seeker is the problem. The one who is searching for peace is the one creating the disturbance. The one who is looking for presence is the one who is stuck in time. This sounds like a riddle, but it points to something essential. You are already what you are seeking. The light you're chasing is the light that is doing the chasing. The consciousness that longs for awakening is already awake. It's just temporarily hypnotized by the drama of the search. Tolle puts it beautifully. He says that the word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the false self likes to keep it that way. But enlightenment is simply your natural state of felt oneness and with being. It's finding your true nature and beyond name and form. It's not something you achieve, it's something you recognize. The second major trick of the false self in spiritual seeking is turning awakening into a future event. Tolle emphasizes that you can only be present now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, only now. But the seeking mind constantly projects awakening into the future. Someday I will be free. Eventually, I will be at peace. After more practice, I will be enlightened. Every one of these statements is a denial of the present moment. Every one of them says that now is not good enough. Every one of them pushes awakening and into a tomorrow that never comes. Because when tomorrow arrives, it will be now, and the seeking mind will still be looking toward another tomorrow. This creates an endless loop. The seeker needs the future yet to exist. Without the promise of future attainment, the search loses its purpose, so the mind keeps inventing new goals, new levels, new stages of development. You finish one retreat and sign up for another. You master one technique and move to the next. The destination keeps moving, because arrival would mean the death of the traveler. This is why so many sincere soul searchers spend decades on the path without transformation. They are not failing at spirituality. They are succeeding at seeking. They have become professional seekers. The search itself has become their identity. And secretly, unconsciously, they don't want to find what they're looking for, because finding it would mean the end of who they have become. Research on spiritual development thus confirms this pattern. Studies show that many seekers experience disillusionment and stagnation after years of practice. These feelings, they're some of the false self's most potent tools, designed to keep you chained and unhappy. With every shift in consciousness, you'll face new challenges. The false self adapts. It's a master of disguise, finding new ways to maintain its grip, to remain in control. The third trick, it's perhaps the most devastating. The false self uses soul searching, your yearning for something more, to keep you from the present moment. Really think about it. Why do folks usually begin a journey of self-discovery? Because something feels off. There's suffering, a deep dissatisfaction. There's this nagging sense that life should be different than it is. These are genuine experiences, valid feelings. But the false self twists them. It whispers that the solution lies somewhere else, in another state of mind, in some elusive future experience, on another plane of existence, another level of consciousness. And so, the endless search begins, not as a deep exploration of what's right here, right now, but as a desperate escape from what is. Eckhart Tolle addresses this head-on. He says the root of our unhappiness or our dysfunction is the mind's refusal, its unwillingness, to open itself up to this very moment, to embrace life as it is, to say yes to everything. The soul searcher, the spiritual aspirant, often wants to say yes to some imagined perfect future, while simultaneously rejecting the reality that's unfolding right now. But here's the mind-bending paradox that shatters the trap. The present moment, this moment, is the only place where awakening can ever happen. Not in some hazy future where you imagine yourself to be enlightened, not in some distant memory of a past experience. Only here, only now. When you truly grasp this, the entire edifice of seeking, the endless quest, collapses. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to become. There's no spiritual ladder to climb, no secret level to unlock. There's only this moment, endlessly unfolding and the awareness, the pure consciousness that witnesses it all. That awareness, that silent observer, is what you truly are. Not the story of being a seeker, not the identity of someone on a journey, just the simple, open awareness. That's reading these words, right now. This is why Eckhart Tolle emphasizes presence so relentlessly. Not as some technique to diligently practice for future results, but as the recognition of what is. What has always been. You are present right now. You cannot not be present. The only question, the only real question, is whether you are aware of being aware, whether the light, the source, knows itself as light. So, what does this mean practically? Should you immediately stop reading spiritual books? Stop engaging in mindfulness practice? Stop watching videos like this one? Not necessarily, but a fundamental shift, a reorientation, is absolutely required. Instead of tirelessly seeking awakening as something to eventually attain in the future, you begin to recognize it as what is already present, as the ground of your being. Instead of desperately trying to get somewhere spiritually, you start to simply be, to be completely present where you are. Instead of relentlessly practicing to become peaceful, you notice the peace, the stillness that already exists beneath the constant chatter, the mental noise. This isn't just some subtle nuance in technique. It's not just a different way of doing things. It's a complete reversal of direction. So as the seeker looks outward and forward, always searching for what's next. Presence looks inward and now, always rooted in this moment. The seeker accumulates experiences and knowledge, always trying to gain more. Presence releases everything, letting go of all striving and rests peacefully in what remains. Eckhart Tolle describes this shift as the difference between doing and being. Most spiritual practices, even well-intentioned ones, are focused on doing mindfulness practice, doing breathwork exercises, doing affirmations and doing yoga. And doing certainly has its place, its value, but doing alone can never take you to being. Only stopping, only letting go, can truly do that. There's a famous Zen story that illustrates this perfectly. A student approaches a master and asks, "How long will it take me to achieve awakening?" The master replies, 10 years. The student, eager to accelerate the process, asks, "What if I work twice as hard?" The master says, 20 years. The student is completely perplexed. Why would working harder take longer? Because, the master explains patiently, the harder you work, the further from the goal you go. You simply cannot effort your way to effortlessness. This points us directly to the fourth trick of the false self in soul searching. It subtly transforms awakening into a relentless project of self-improvement. I need to become a better version of myself. I need to fix all my flaws. I need to deeply develop my consciousness. I need to radically raise my vibration. All of these statements, these deeply ingrained beliefs, assume that something is fundamentally wrong with you. Right now, they assume that the you that exists in this moment needs to be dramatically upgraded, thoroughly improved, or completely replaced by a better you. But who is the one doing the improving, the false self? And what is the false self desperately trying to create? A better false self, a more refined illusion. Eckhart Tolle makes this abundantly clear when he says, "You cannot improve yourself. You can only dissolve yourself." True transformation, real awakening, isn't about becoming a better person. It's about recognizing what profoundly exists before the person, before the story. It's not about endlessly perfecting the mask you wear. It's about realizing, deeply, that you are not the mask. This is radically and fundamentally different from the standard self-help approach that dominates modern spirituality. The self-help approach tirelessly tells you, work on yourself, and you will become better. Eckhart Tolle's approach gently whispers, realize that the self you are relentlessly working on is simply a mental construct, an illusion, and you will finally be free. The difference is profound, truly transformative. One path leads to an endless, exhausting project of self-improvement, a never-ending quest that never reaches completion. The other path leads to a deep, inherent recognition. That brings the entire project to a joyful, liberating end. One path keeps the false self completely intact, while endlessly polishing its surface. The other path dissolves the false self, gently exposing its illusory nature, its inherent emptiness. The fifth trick of the false self is perhaps the sneakiest of all. It deceptively uses soul-searching, your yearning for something more, to skillfully avoid facing the shadow. The shadow, as Carl Jung eloquently explained, is a term from Jungian psychology, referring to all the disowned parts of ourselves, the aspects we have relentlessly rejected, consciously repressed, or stubbornly denied, the simmering anger we desperately don't want to admit, the deep-seated fear we frantically try to transcend, the unacknowledged pain we stubbornly attempt to meditate away. Sadly, many soul searchers use their practice, their spiritual pursuits, as what's commonly called spiritual bypassing. They use higher consciousness concepts, elevated language, to avoid dealing with the messy, complex, lower-level emotional realities. They choose to float serenely above their pain, instead of courageously moving through it. They relentlessly seek light, while stubbornly denying the existence of darkness. They zealously pursue transcendence, while consciously avoiding full-body, embodied incarnation. But Eckhart Tolle's teachings are firmly grounded in the radical acceptance of what is. This includes everything, the joyful and the painful. This includes the shadow, the pain body. This includes absolutely everything that arises in the full spectrum of human experience. You simply cannot awaken by skillfully escaping your humanity. You awaken by fully, completely, yours inhabiting it. The shadow doesn't magically disappear when you become spiritual. It simply goes underground. It operates from the unconscious, influencing your thoughts and actions in subtle, often destructive, ways. And it often takes on cunning, deceptive, spiritual forms. The teacher who eloquently preaches humility, while secretly craving constant admiration. The healer who expertly avoids their own deep wounds. The guru who passionately speaks of surrender, while meticulously maintaining rigid control. These aren't failures of spirituality. They're not evidence that spirituality is somehow broken. They are, in fact, successes of the spiritual false self. The false self, ever adaptable, has learned to flawlessly speak the language of awakening, while simultaneously maintaining its core structure of separation, relentless defense, and unwavering control. You might even recognize this pattern in yourself. Perhaps you have noticed moments where your spiritual practice felt more like a performance than a genuine expression of presence, where your mindfulness practice became more about being a good meditator than simply being, where your conscious pursuit of humility became subtly, almost imperceptibly, competitive. This is not something to feel guilty about. It's not a reason to beat yourself up. It's simply what the false self does. It adapts. It survives. It hijacks whatever material is readily available, including the most sacred teachings. Seeing this clearly, recognizing this pattern, is not a failure. It's a crucial, vital, first step towards true liberation. It's the dawn of real awakening. Because now, you're aware of the game. And awareness is the one thing the false self can't co-opt. It's its kryptonite. Now, I want to share what Eckhart Tolle considers the way out of this trap, because recognizing the trap is only the first step. You need to understand what replaces the seeking. The answer is deceptively simple. Presence, being here, one now, not as a technique to achieve something, but as the recognition of what you already are. Eckhart Tolle teaches that only presence can free you of the false self, and you can only be present now. This means the end of seeking happens in a moment of recognition, not at the end of a long journey, not after years of mindfulness practice. In a single instant of waking up from the dream of seeking. This instant can happen while you're doing your mindfulness practice. It can happen while you're doing the dishes. It can happen while you're watching this video. It can happen at any moment when you stop looking for awakening and simply notice what is aware right now. What is aware right now? Not what are you aware of. Those are objects of consciousness, thoughts, sensations, perceptions. But what is the awareness itself? What is the knowing quality that is present in every experience? When you turn attention from the content of experience to the aware presence in which experience appears, something shifts. The soul searcher dissolves into the seeking. The observer merges with the observed. And what remains is not nothing. It is everything, appearing as this moment, exactly as it is. This is what Eckhart Tolle points to when he speaks of the gap between thoughts, that brief instant of silence before the next thought arises. That is not emptiness. That is your true nature. The problem is that we've been conditioned to overlook it, because the mind considers it uninteresting. There's nothing there to grab, no experience to have, and no story to tell. But in that nothing is everything. In that silence is the end of seeking. In that gap is what you've been looking for all along. Let me be practical about how to apply this understanding, because I know that simply hearing these words doesn't automatically end the seeking pattern. The false self is clever. It'll take what I'm saying and turn it into another thing to seek. I must stop seeking. I must find presence. I must recognize my true nature. The first practical step is to notice the soul searcher, not to stop seeking through effort, but to become aware of the one who seeks. When you catch yourself thinking, I need to be more present, or I should do my mindfulness practice more, or I'm not awakened yet, simply observe. Who is thinking this? Who is the one who feels spiritually inadequate? This observation isn't done with judgment. It's done with curiosity. You're not trying to fix the soul searcher or eliminate it. You're shining the light of awareness on it, and in that light, something unexpected happens. The soul searcher can't survive direct observation. It needs the darkness of unconsciousness to operate. The second practical step is to notice what is already present, right now, before you achieve anything, before you improve yourself, before you reach any goal. There is awareness. There is the simple fact of being alive. There is this moment, appearing as it is. Can you sense this? Not as a concept, but as a direct experience. The aliveness that exists before any story about your spiritual progress. The presence that needs no improvement because it's already complete. The third practical step is to welcome everything that arises, including the seeking itself. Don't try to stop the false self through aggression. That's just false self, fighting false self. Instead, allow the seeking to be there. Let the spiritual ambition exist. Let the longing for awakening appear, but observe it with compassion, Recognize that the seeking comes from a genuine place, the heart longing to return home. The false self has hijacked this longing, but the longing itself is sacred. It's consciousness calling itself back to consciousness. When you observe the seeking without trying to stop it, something interesting happens. The energy that was caught in the search begins to settle. The frantic quality of spiritual ambition starts to relax, and in that relaxation, you notice that what you were seeking was present all along, waiting patiently for you to stop running long enough to see it. Let me address a question that might be arising. If seeking is a trap, does that mean all spiritual practice is pointless? Should you throw away your books and abandon your mindfulness practice? Not necessarily. Practices can serve awakening, if they're oriented correctly. The problem isn't the practice. The problem is the seeking energy that drives the practice. When you do your mindfulness practice to become something, you strengthen the soul searcher. When you do your mindfulness practice as an expression of presence, you dissolve into the mindfulness practice itself. The shift is from doing mindfulness practice to being mindfulness practice, from practicing to recognize awakening, to practicing because you recognize awakening, from effort toward a future goal, to expression of a present reality. This might sound like a subtle distinction, but it changes everything. The same action can either strengthen the false self or dissolve it, depending on the orientation. Sitting in silence to achieve peace is different from sitting in silence because you've recognized the peace that is already here. Think of it this way. When you walk because you need to get somewhere, walking is a means to an end. But when you walk simply to walk, so present to each step, feeling the ground beneath your feet, walking becomes an end in itself. It becomes a mindfulness practice. It becomes presence expressed through movement. The same principle applies to all spiritual practice. When the seeking drops away, what remains is not inactivity. What remains is presence expressing itself through whatever form it takes. Reading becomes presence reading. Listening becomes presence listening. Even watching this video becomes presence receiving pointers to its own nature. As we come to the end of this exploration, I want to leave you with a recognition, not a new technique, not another thing to do, just a simple seeing. Right now, as you listen to these words, there is awareness. You don't need to create this awareness. You don't need to improve it. You don't need to seek it. It is what you are. The spiritual search was necessary to bring you to this point. Without the search, you wouldn't be here, hearing these words. So the search served its purpose. It brought you to the door. But now, at the door, the search must end. You can't carry the search into what lies beyond. You must leave it at the threshold. Eckhart Tolle went through this himself. He describes years of unhappiness, anxiety, and depression before his awakening. He was a soul searcher. And then, in a single moment, the soul searcher dissolved. Not because he achieved his goal, but because he saw through the one who was seeking. Eckhart Tolle famously describes the moment when the thought arose, "I cannot live with myself any longer." And then he noticed something strange. If I cannot live with myself, there must be two. The I and the self that I cannot live with. Maybe only one of them is real. In that instant of seeing, the soul searcher collapsed into what it had been seeking all along. This same recognition is available in every moment. It does not require special circumstances. It does not require years of preparation. It only requires a moment of clear seeing, a moment when you stop looking for what you are and simply notice what is looking. This is available to you right now, not as a future attainment, not as a reward for more mindfulness practice. Right now, in this moment, as you read these words, the false self will immediately say, "Not yet. You need more preparation. You are not ready. There is more to understand first." These are the final tricks. The false self does not want to die. It will do anything to maintain the search. But what if you simply did not believe these voices? What if you recognized them as the very mechanism that has kept you trapped? What if, just for a moment, you stopped looking for anything and simply noticed what is already awake, looking through your eyes, listening through your ears, being through your being? This is the end of seeking, not an achievement, a recognition, not a future state, a present reality, not something you do, something you are. Share in the comments what resonated most with this teaching. Have you noticed the spiritual false self operating in your own search? Have you experienced moments where seeking dropped away and presence was simply obvious? Remember to subscribe and enable notifications. The false self wants you to seek forever. These videos offer pointers to what lies beyond seeking. Every view, every like, every subscription helps spread this understanding to more people who are ready to stop searching and start seeing. Until next time, may you recognize that what you are looking for is what you already are, and may the search that brought you here be the search that finally ends here.